you start out with potting?
Well, I started almost in spite of um, occurrences because I was an English major. I couldn't get into a pottery class in my college. And so after I graduated, I was working down at Martha's Vineyard, and a man there had a pottery shop. And so I was able to trade him time for studio use. And so that's where it kind of informally started. Then my father built me an old kick wheel out of a millstone, and I used that for several years. I went to Japan in 1975. I landed an apprenticeship there. And when I came back, I then apprenticed to Bob Wu, who's a potter who lives in Shutesbury. And so for 2 days a week, I would go to his studio and learn more about studio setup and being in the business as a potter. So from that, during all that time, I was teaching middle school English, and I left that job to set out to try my hand at surviving off of selling my own clay. And my first fair I did was a little local thing in Huntington, and it was in December or November. And I remember selling all these pots and thinking, this will be so great, this will be so easy. But little did I know that then came January, February, March, and April, which are non-selling months. So it took until, summer of the next year that I got myself going with it again. And then from that point on, I'm self-taught, really. It came out of a passion and a drive. I've studied informally here or there, but mostly I've just kept at it myself. I was working as a potter up in Huntington, and Bernie McMahon, who was a man who taught clay here before me, came up there and asked me if I wanted a job. And I said, at the time I did not have the proper degrees. However, I think because my reputation as a clay artist was strong, they hired me, and that was 1991. And at that point, I came here teaching. I had never even taken a formal college clay class, so it was by invention that my classes began, and that's where it started. I grew up in Westfield. I went to school in New York State, St. Lawrence University, and then I traveled for several years, but I got a teaching job then in Westfield, and so that's when I moved to Huntington. I feel like it's the best of all situations. Like, I feel like when I'm in my schedule right now is I come here on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I have 2 clay classes typically. And then on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I work in my own studio in Huntington. So in the days I'm here, they're full of energy and high exploration in clay. And I'm reminded daily of how much I know relative to what students need to know. It also, these days here, remind me of why I started working with clay in the first place, because there's something very alluring about it, magnetic. It's almost like an addiction, and when you begin, you're immersed in it in a way that it's highly exciting. As a business person in clay, that changes over time, because you begin to have to consider the market. You have to consider the market, what people will buy, what colors are popular, all of that. So once it's your business, it becomes a more narrow focus. So for me, it's really good to be here in this highly experimental place with lots of energy going back and forth between many students and myself. And then I love being in my own studio, which is very quiet and not answering questions of anyone. A lot of the work I make for sale is repetitive, but it can be quite meditative, because it's just the repeating of a shape again and again. Lately I've been doing more one-of-a-kind raku pieces and pit fire pieces, and that work I feel is more directly related to what's happening down here. I feel like so from here what I take is high enthusiasm for clay, validation of this choice of direction in one's life, and also just great ideas that find their way into my work, whether it's conscious or not. And that's the piece that I most value, that kind of exchange of ideas that you see happen during critiques here. It's exciting, and so that level of excitement gets brought back to my studio, and hopefully it gets folded into the work that I'm doing up there. Here's what I've been doing. When I teach pottery too, I give assignments and then I make myself do the assignments. And so often I have brought my work in to be critiqued by my pottery two students during their critiques. And so what that does is it reminds me of whether the assignment's any good or not. But it also, because I'm bringing work in to be critiqued by my students, I attend to it in a way that I might not otherwise. And so I can't say it's directly like a pot affects a pot, but it's more like the process affects my process. And it's very, very good. It's a good, if we talked about like elements of design, balance and contrast are two things that come through as a result of teaching and then working in your own studio. I have a really strong sense of place in Huntington. I'm reminded of it daily at some points of the year, but if not daily, very often. Part of becoming a potter had to do with a lifestyle choice. And what being self-employed does is it gives you some control over the quality of your days. So that, our goal was to live simply. Voluntary simplicity and small is beautiful were two, and still are, two of our major life tenets. So we tried to work within 5 minutes of where we lived and to keep our needs really simple. And in doing so, part of that is to grow a lot of our own food. So on days I'm home, I'm not only, if it's a day that it's going to rain, I'll get my onions in as opposed to trimming my pots because I can do that. So, and that's just a simple example of many things. If it's a beautiful snowy winter day, I will cross-country ski. Or most recently, I had an order for 60 plates, and I threw all those plates on miserable February and March days so that now I can work in my garden. So there's a way that it impacts the entire quality of your life that is much different than when you're working 9 to 5 at a job for somebody else. It doesn't mean you work any less. In fact, I think you probably work more because you're putting in more hours and you're making quite a bit less money than most people will make. But the flip side of that is just the quality of your life can be so great. It is so great that that time feels more valuable to us than money.
What lessons about life has clay taught you?
Oh, so many. Like a big one is that you don't have full control over things that happen in life. And clay is one of those medium that you can do everything right and put it into account, and there's forces larger than you that determines in some way how your pot comes through. So the control thing is a really big thing. I find it also as just direct connection with the earth. Clay is the earth, and so there's something about that connection we have in our garden and our lifestyle, and I have in my job. So there's that. Patience. The lack of control is something that drives people away from clay. Certain people, because you can put many hours into something and have it not succeed relative to any number of forces. So the value of the creative process in one's life, to be able to have that be a part of your work is invaluable, I find, and something I would have a hard time doing without.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. Was there anything else you'd like to add?
No, but thank you. This was good to think about. That last question, I'm sure I will continue thinking about.